She went to the hospital to confront the husband's mistress, but watched him love her in front of her eyes. Her husband sat by the bed, a plastic spoon in his hand, feeding another woman with the same tenderness he once saved for his wife. The way he wiped the corner of her lips, the soft whisper that made her smile. It was the same tone, the same warmth that used to make her feel safe. In that cold, white room, under the hum of hospital lights, 10 years of marriage ended without a sound. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there, frozen, watching the man she built her world around care for someone else. Every breath felt heavier, every heartbeat quieter. Betrayal didn't explode. It broke softly, one silent second at a time. The spoon, the whisper, the smile, that was all it took to erase a lifetime. If you've ever loved someone more than yourself, you'll feel her pain in every word. But a woman like her doesn't break that easily. Stay with her and see just how far her strength will go. Alara stepped back, her hand trembling as her purse slipped from her grasp. The sound of it hitting the floor echoed through the sterile air. Sharp, final, lipstick, keys. A photo of their wedding day scattered across the tile. She didn't move to pick them up. She couldn't. Her breath caught somewhere between her chest and her throat. The world didn't explode, it simply folded in on itself. The monitor beeped softly beside the bed, steady, uncaring, like nothing had changed. But everything had. She stared at the man she once thought she knew. The one who used to hold her shaking hands through night shifts, who promised forever under the Georgia sky. Now, he wouldn't even look at her. A nurse passed by the doorway, unaware she'd just walked through the ruins of a marriage. Alara's knees weakened. Her fingers touched the wedding ring. Cold, tighter than ever. The tears never came. Only silence. Only the sound of her own heart breaking in rhythm with the machines. The world kept spinning. She didn't. Her mind slipped backward, searching for the moment everything still made sense. She had been 24 when she met Robert. He was a tired law student with a second-hand briefcase and a smile that reached his eyes. She was a young nurse working double shifts at County General. Their first conversation was simple. "You look tired," she said, noticing the dark circles under his eyes. "So do you," he'd answered softly. "But somehow, you still glow." Back then, everything felt possible. He would walk her home after late shifts, holding her hand like it was something sacred. They'd share cheap coffee and big dreams in a diner that stayed open all night. Robert talked about changing lives through justice. Alara talked about saving them through care. Two broke souls building a future out of faith and exhaustion. On weekends, they would sit under the oak trees by the river, counting fireflies and promises. He said, "One day, we'll have a house with a porch swing." She believed him. Back then, love didn't need luxury, it only needed hope. They built a life piece by piece. She worked nights, he studied days. Bills were paid late, meals were cheap, but laughter filled the gaps. When Robert passed the bar exam, Alara cried harder than he did. They saved every dollar, tips from her shifts, small bonuses from his first cases, until they bought a small white house on Willow Street. The paint peeled, the roof leaked, but it was theirs. He hung a wooden sign by the door that read, "Home." She planted roses under the kitchen window. Every petal that bloomed felt like proof their struggle had meant something. "When you build something together," she'd told him one night, resting her head on his shoulder, "it lasts forever." He kissed her hair. Forever, he'd promised. The years rolled by with the rhythm of work and devotion. They built a family, a reputation, a story that looked perfect from the outside. But love that's never questioned starts to forget what it's made of. It began quietly. A new watch, a new cologne, a man who suddenly cared about details he'd ignored for years. Alara noticed the small things first. Late nights at the office, dinners gone cold, the way his phone always faced down. When she asked about it, he smiled too easily. "Just work, honey. You know how it is." But something in his eyes had changed. The warmth she'd once trusted was replaced by distance. Polite, practiced, unreachable. He started smelling like expensive cologne and guilt. She started sleeping on her side of the bed, alone even when he was beside her. At work, she told herself it was just stress, just a phase, just marriage. But deep down, her instincts, the same ones that had saved countless patients, whispered the truth. Something was dying, and she couldn't stop it. Every lie begins small, every silence grows teeth, and Alara's heart had already begun to flinch at the sound of his name. One evening, as the sun faded through the blinds, Alara reached for Robert's phone to check the time. The screen blinked. Locked. A new password. "It's for work," he said, almost too quickly. "Confidential cases. You wouldn't understand." She nodded, pretending not to care, but inside, something cold settled. In 30 years, they'd shared everything. Laughter, bills, even the same exhaustion. Now, there was a wall. Invisible. Icy. That small code, 4 digits she would never know, became the first symbol of distance, a quiet declaration that something had changed. She told herself it was nothing, just privacy, just work. But late that night, when the phone buzzed and he turned away to answer it, she saw the reflection of his smile in the dark window. A smile that didn't belong to her anymore. A password is such a small thing. Yet, it can lock out an entire life. It started with a sound. A soft laugh from the other side of a midnight call. Alara had been half asleep when she heard it. That light, breathy giggle followed by words that sliced through the dark. "Good night, babe." Robert whispered something back, low and tender. The tone alone was enough. Alara froze, every nerve alert. When he slipped into bed minutes later, his breathing even, she lay still beside him. The ceiling blurred above her. Her heart thudded, but her lips stayed silent. She wanted to ask, to scream, but the fear of the answer held her still. In the morning, he kissed her cheek like nothing had happened. The same lips that had whispered to someone else. She smiled back, because love, real or broken, teaches you to hide the truth even from yourself. The laughter echoed in her mind all day. 3 days later, his phone buzzed again while he showered. She didn't mean to look, but temptation can sound a lot like self-preservation. One message glowed on the screen. "Can't wait for tomorrow, my love. A." Her stomach turned cold. Her fingers tightened around the counter edge. She read it again, slower this time, as if words might change their meaning, but they didn't. They stayed cruel, soft, and final. The mirror caught her reflection. A woman, pale and still, holding proof that her life was splitting apart. He came out of the bathroom humming. Steam trailed behind him, warm and harmless. "Everything okay?" he asked, drying his hair. Alara smiled, a practiced smile. "Everything's fine." But something inside her was already gone. People think betrayal is a blow, but sometimes it's a whisper written in pixels, and it hits harder than any shout. Grief didn't break her, it sharpened her. Alara had spent years diagnosing symptoms, reading silences, finding what others missed. Now, she turned that same focus inward, toward her own life. She began keeping notes, times he left, places he said he'd been, new cologne brands, unfamiliar credit charges, every clue written like a medical chart. The facts told their own story. Patterns emerged, lies disguised as routine. She replayed every conversation in her mind, listening not for what he said but for what he avoided. Each omission was a pulse of truth beneath the surface. Her hands no longer trembled. Her eyes grew steady. When you've spent decades saving others, you learn how to keep yourself alive. Even when your heart's on the table. And Alara wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. She found them by accident, tucked deep inside his dresser drawer, glossy slips of truth that no excuse could erase. Receipts, jewelry stores, dinners she'd never attended, hotels she'd never seen. Her fingers moved through them like pages in a story she hadn't agreed to live. The last one stopped her cold, a bracelet engraved with tiny letters. To A, love, R, Her breath caught. The initials burned. He'd spent their shared savings on another woman. The same money she'd earned from years of night shifts, saving lives while he spent hers away. The paper shook in her hands. For the first time, anger cut through the numbness. Love might forgive, but betrayal leaves a receipt. And now she had proof, not of what she'd lost, but of what he truly was. That night, while folding laundry, Alara heard his voice drifting from the hallway. Soft, intimate. "Rest well, sweetheart," he whispered into the phone. The tone was tender, low, almost sacred. She froze, one of his shirts clutched in her hands. That voice, the warmth, the care, she'd known it her whole life. But it wasn't meant for her anymore. She held her breath, listening. His laughter followed, quiet and private, ending with a promise she couldn't hear. When he walked past her moments later, phone tucked away, he smiled. "Long day at work," he said. She nodded. The air between them felt heavy, thick with invisible words. As he disappeared into their bedroom, Alara stood in the dim light of the hallway, surrounded by clean clothes and a mess she couldn't wash away. She realized she had just overheard her husband loving another woman. Sometimes betrayal doesn't need to be seen. It only needs to be heard. The next morning he left early, saying there was a client emergency. Alara stayed behind, her mind circling the night before. Then the phone rang again. His voice spilled through the answering machine. "I'll be at St. Mary's. Don't wait up." St. Mary's. The name hit her like a pulse. That was her hospital. Her hands moved before she could think. She logged into the system, access she'd used for years as a nurse. The list of patients loaded slowly, names blurring until one stood out in clean black letters. Alana Pierce. Admitted 2 weeks ago. Her throat tightened. She didn't know the woman, but something in her gut already did. Robert hadn't been working late. He'd been visiting a patient. The screen glowed back at her. Sterile, clinical, merciless. And in that cold digital light she found her next step. The hallways of St. Mary's had never felt this long. Alara walked them like she was heading toward her own execution. Her shoes clicked softly against the polished floor, echoing between the walls. Room 314. She repeated it silently. Her husband's voice had said that number on a call she wasn't supposed to hear. She clutched her purse close, her ID tag heavy against her chest. Every breath tasted of antiseptic and fear. The nurses at the station nodded to her in recognition. "You okay, Alara?" one asked. She smiled faintly. "Just checking on a patient." Each step down the corridor felt slower than the last. The air thinned. The buzzing lights above her hummed like a countdown. At the end of the hallway stood a single door. The number on it gleamed. 314. Her hand hovered over the handle. For a heartbeat, she wished it wasn't true. Then she pushed the door open. Sunlight poured through the blinds, spilling warmth across the white sheets. Robert sat by the bed, spoon in hand, feeding a young woman whose wrist was wrapped in hospital bands. The way he looked at her, careful, tender, was the same way he used to look at Alara when she was sick years ago. The same voice, the same soft laugh, the same gentle hand brushing crumbs from her lips. She stood frozen in the doorway, her reflection faintly visible in the glass beside him. No one noticed her at first. Not him, not the woman. Then the spoon stopped midair. He turned. Their eyes met. 30 years of marriage collapsed into one look. No excuses, no lies, just the truth, naked and cruel, between them. Her purse slipped from her hand. The sound cracked through the air like a gunshot. Everything inside her went silent. Alara didn't remember leaving the room. Only the sound of her own heartbeat pounding against her ribs. Her shoes squeaked across the linoleum floor as she ran. Past the nurse's station, past the elevators, through the glass doors that led to the parking lot. Outside, the air was hot and heavy, but she was shaking with cold. She reached her car, slammed the door shut, and let the silence swallow her. Then the sobs came, sharp, raw, from somewhere deep she didn't know existed. 11 years of love, work, and sacrifice turned to ashes in a single afternoon. She pressed her palms to her eyes, trying to breathe. Her wedding ring cut into her skin. In the rearview mirror, her face looked like someone else's, a stranger staring back. The woman who had walked into that hospital didn't exist anymore. Something inside her had died, but something else had just woken up. Alara sat in her car long after the tears had dried. The steering wheel felt cold under her hands. Her wedding ring pressed against her skin, leaving a faint mark, a bruise shaped like loyalty. She stared out of the windshield, eyes empty but steady. The pain had burned itself out, leaving something sharper behind. "If he can lie," she whispered to her reflection, "then I can fight." It wasn't rage, it was resolve. She wiped her face, started the car, and drove home in silence. The house looked smaller, almost unfamiliar. The scent of him lingered in the hallway. Faint cologne and betrayal. She walked through each room slowly, touching the furniture, the framed photos, the life they had built together. Nothing was broken, yet everything was gone. That night, she took off her ring and placed it on the kitchen counter. The sound it made, small, metallic, final, was the beginning of something new. The next morning, Alara called her sister Maya, older by 3 years, sharper by instinct, a private investigator who'd seen too many women broken by men who wore suits and lies. "He picked the wrong woman to fool," Maya said after listening in silence. "Let's find out who he really is." Alara's voice was calm. "I want the truth. All of it." Maya arrived that evening, laptop and files in hand. Together, they sat at the kitchen table where Alara had once served Robert dinner every night. Now it became their war room. Bank statements, work schedules, social media. They started connecting dots Robert thought were invisible. As they worked, Alara felt something shift again. Pain turning into purpose. When Maya looked up and met her eyes, she said softly, "You're stronger than you think." Alara smiled for the first time in weeks. "No," she said, "I'm just done pretending." 2 weeks of digging. One discovery changed everything. Maya slid a file across the table, a lease agreement for a downtown apartment. The names on it froze Alara's breath. Robert Monroe and Alana Pierce. Lease term, 2 years. Payment source, joint account. He had used their shared savings to build a life with someone else. Alara flipped through the papers, each one cutting deeper. Utility bills, delivery receipts, a second address listed under his name. He wasn't living 2 lives. He'd already left one behind. She imagined him there, pouring wine, laughing, building a world with her money, her sacrifices, her trust. Her fingers tightened around the papers until they tore. Maya's voice cut through the silence. "We'll use this. Every document. Every lie." Alara nodded slowly. The grief had hardened into something unbreakable. If Robert wanted a double life, she would make sure both of them ended. The more they uncovered, the darker it got. Robert hadn't just betrayed her heart. He'd betrayed the law he claimed to uphold. Through his firm, he had funneled joint funds into private accounts, signed fake transfers, and even forged her name on a few, all under the mask of trust. Alara stared at the evidence spread across the table, his signature neat and confident. "He used my life to finance his lies," she whispered. Maya nodded, "and his reputation depends on keeping this buried." That night, Alara sat alone in the quiet kitchen. The house hummed softly, like it was waiting for something. He had stolen her peace, her dignity, her years, but not her intelligence. If he used the law to hide the truth, she would use it to expose him. The thought steadied her heartbeat. Justice wasn't just a dream anymore. It was personal. When Robert left for work the next morning, Alara called Maya. "Let's make him hang himself with his own lies," Maya said. It wasn't revenge for its own sake. It was balance. The quiet, deliberate act of giving truth a voice. Together, they mapped out every move. They'd collect proof, trace every transfer, record every word. Alara learned how to hide in plain sight, smiling at him over dinner, nodding through his stories, while her phone recorded the details of his deceit. Each lie he spoke became a tool in her hands. Each night, she grew steadier, colder, stronger. He thought she was broken. He didn't see the calm before the storm. By the time he realized she was watching, it would already be too late. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't anger. It's silence sharpened by truth. Days turned into quiet preparation, each one bringing her closer to the moment she would take back control. Elara moved quietly through the house, every step deliberate. The same home that once held laughter now held her plan. She opened the box Maya had brought, small cameras no larger than a coin. "This time," she whispered, her voice steady, "I'll be the one watching." She placed one behind the bookshelf, another above the hallway frame, one near his office desk, and one hidden between the roses he'd given her months ago. Each lens blinked to life, small red dots in the shadows. For years, Robert had lived behind closed doors and excuses. Now, the walls themselves would remember what he'd done. That night, she tested the feed. The rooms glowed on her laptop screen. Silent, waiting. He thought he owned this house. He thought he owned the story. But now, every lie would have a witness. Elara sat back, calm for the first time in months. The house was no longer his. It was hers again. One secret camera at a time. 2 weeks later, Robert came home early. Elara recognized the pattern. Perfume on his collar, false warmth in his voice. But this time, he wasn't alone. He opened the front door and stepped aside for Alana Pierce. "She lived here before," he told her with a small laugh. "Now it's ours." Elara watched the feed from her laptop in the guest room. Her pulse was slow, her breath even. She saw them walk through the hallway she once decorated, the kitchen she once filled with Sunday mornings. Alana's hand brushed the walls, curious, unaware she was walking through another woman's life. Robert poured wine into glasses that still had Alara's fingerprints on them. He smiled, the same smile he used to wear when saying, "I love you." Alara's throat burned, but her eyes stayed dry. Humiliation can either break you or rebuild you, and she chose the latter. The next day, Elara watched the footage again. Alana stood in front of her old mirror, wearing Alara's favorite silk dress, the one Robert had bought for their anniversary. Robert leaned against the doorway, smiling. "It suits you better," he said, voice low, casual. Elara froze at the words. Her hand hovered over the keyboard. The sound of her own dress rustling on another woman's body felt louder than any scream. On the screen, Robert reached out, fixing the necklace that once rested on Alara's skin. It was more than betrayal. It was erasure. He wasn't just replacing her. He was rewriting her. Every object, every scent, every memory repurposed for someone new. Elara pressed pause. The image froze. Alana smiling, Robert close behind. For a long moment, Elara simply stared. Then she whispered, "Keep smiling. I'm still here." And somewhere deep inside, pain turned into a kind of quiet fury. Elara came home early the next afternoon. The door was unlocked. Voices drifted from the living room. She moved silently to the hallway corner and saw them, Robert and Alana standing by the fireplace. A black trash bag lay open on the floor. Inside it were pieces of her life, framed photos, nursing certificates, the wedding picture from Savannah. Alana laughed softly, holding up an old photo. "She kept everything." Robert shrugged. "She got old." Alara's chest tightened, but she didn't step forward. Instead, she watched as they threw away her memories like clutter. Every photo that hit the trash sounded like a year being erased. Her hand found the edge of the wall for balance. The room blurred, her pulse roaring in her ears. But no tear fell, not one. They thought she was gone. They didn't know she was watching, recording, remembering. And one day soon, they'd see what it meant to underestimate her. That night, Elara showed Maya the footage. The laughter, the dress, the trash bag. Maya's jaw tightened. He's not just cruel. He's dangerous. She opened her laptop and pulled up more files. I dug deeper into Alana Pierce. She wasn't just a mistress, she was a patient once, admitted for overdose. Guess who brought her in? Alara's breath caught. Robert. He promised her a new life. She tried to end hers when he didn't keep his word. Alara sat still, shock spreading like ice. Maya continued. And now, he's telling people you're unstable. He's building a case, that you're losing your mind. If he succeeds, he takes everything. The room fell silent. Alara looked at the screen, at Robert's smiling face frozen mid-lie. He wanted to break me, she said quietly. He forgot who taught me how to fight. Maya nodded. Then let's remind him. And, for the first time, Alara smiled. Not with warmth, but with certainty. Alara stood in the kitchen, the morning light cold and sharp through the blinds. The night had left her empty, but not weak. She'd spent hours replaying every lie, every smile, every word that used to sound like love. Now, they were only echoes. Maya sat across from her, spreading documents over the table. He's trying to trap you, Alara. Financially, legally, he wants control. Alara's hands were steady as she looked up. Then I'll give him truth instead. Maya studied her for a moment. Truth cuts deeper than revenge. Alara nodded. That's why it works. For the first time, she didn't feel afraid. The woman who once lived for someone else was gone. What remained was clarity. Every receipt, every signature, every secret had become ammunition. Robert thought she was broken. He had no idea he had built his own destruction. Alara picked up the folder of evidence, her wedding ring still lying cold on the counter. He wanted a war, she whispered. He's about to get one. Outside, the sun rose higher, pale light on a woman reborn from ruin. A week later, the invitations went out. Alara titled the event, A Farewell Dinner. A gesture of peace, she said. Closure after a long marriage. Robert didn't question it. He loved attention, loved being seen as the calm, understanding husband. You're finally ready to move on, he said, smiling over breakfast. She met his gaze. Yes, I'm ready. He didn't notice the coolness in her tone. The guest list was perfect. Family, friends, colleagues, even his law partner. Everyone whose opinion mattered. Everyone whose respect he couldn't afford to lose. While Robert admired his reflection, Alara and Maya set their stage. Cameras hidden, recordings cued, documents prepared. The dining room wasn't for reconciliation. It was for revelation. The house smelled of rosemary and roasted lamb, just like the early years. Familiar comfort wrapped around a quiet storm. Maya leaned in before leaving. He thinks tonight is about goodbye. Alara smiled faintly. It is, just not in the way he expects. By sunset, every light was ready, every truth waiting. The final act of a marriage built on lies was about to begin. The dinner began like a celebration. Glasses clinked. Laughter filled the air. Robert thrived in the spotlight, his charm polished as ever. She's been struggling, he said softly, glancing at Alara. Emotional exhaustion, you know. Marriage can take a toll. Polite nods circled the table. Alara's expression didn't change. You're right, she said, rising slowly. Marriage can take a toll. Let's talk about what it takes to destroy one. She pressed play on her laptop. Robert's voice filled the room. She got old. She stopped being interesting. The sound landed like a blade. Forks stopped. Glasses froze mid-air. Robert's mother gasped. His law partner stared at him, silent. Alara stepped closer. That's what you said about the woman who built your life, Robert. His face drained of color. You're twisting. She interrupted, calm and clear. No, I'm just playing your truth. Silence stretched long enough to break him. For years, he'd spoken lies freely. Tonight, his own words became his cage. Power shifted. Quiet, complete, irreversible. The fallout came fast. By morning, rumors spread through every office and courtroom in town. Maya had already delivered the evidence, fraudulent transfers, forged authorizations, and recorded confessions. Robert Monroe's name, once respected, now lived in whispers. His firm suspended him. Clients withdrew. His law license was under review. He called Alara, but she didn't answer. The silence was her justice. Reporters gathered outside the courthouse. Sources confirm misconduct, they said. Financial deception involving a marital account. Each headline stripped another piece of his pride. Alara watched from her apartment window, calm, almost detached. It wasn't satisfaction she felt. It was freedom. He had stolen her trust, her peace, her years. But she had taken back her story. When Maya handed her the official documents, investigation confirmed, assets frozen, Alara read them slowly. He used love to disguise greed, she said softly, but love doesn't lie. By evening, Robert Monroe was no longer a husband, no longer a lawyer, just a man undone by the truth he created. 1 year later, the seasons had changed, and so had she. Alara lived in a small apartment above the river. Light poured through the windows, touching stacks of books and a vase of wildflowers. Her journal lay open beside a cup of tea. Inside, she had written, "Love should never cost your dignity. Sometimes losing everything is how you find yourself again." She closed the book, a small smile on her lips. The scars had faded, but they'd taught her more than any promise ever could. She still wore her nurse's badge proudly. She still cared, still healed. But now she included herself among those worth saving. Maya visited often, always bringing laughter instead of plans. "You finally look free," she said. "I am," Alara replied. Outside, the world was loud, but inside there was peace. To every woman who'd been made to feel small, Alara had one message. If this story touched you, share it. Someone needs it today. And before you leave, hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss the next story of strength, love, and the power of truth. Because survival isn't revenge, it's rebirth.